Alright, this is the map gaming video. At the moment there's a Esamir territory alert going on right now. It's the middle of the afternoon. I figure now would be a pretty good time to kind of go over some of the ways that I use the map to find us fights, and hopefully it'll help some of you guys out when squad leading or platoon leading and finding some fights of your own. We're going to find a hex here that we can use as a good example, and I think we're going to use LE Forest Pass. There are quite a few different ways you can use to identify population. In the top right corner, if you're just looking for like, how much we have on a continent or how many we have overall, you get the little statistics thing in the top right corner. I usually have this set to continent population. As you can see, it's fairly balanced right now. We most likely don't want to show up on continents where we have, 40+% of the hex, or of all the hexes. Sometimes you can switch over the world population if you're really curious of how well we're doing during an alert. But what really matters is the region population. This is how I most often identify where we can make a difference in a fight, or where there's just so much enemy that we would be better off just setting up in a different hex nearby than actually trying to respond to that hex itself. If we look at LE Forest Pass in the bottom right hand corner here, you can see that we've got a couple different indicators here. We got the actual population percentages at the bottom, and as you see, TR has 77% of the population right now, and a 25 to 48. Allies detected are 12 to 24, and they are 23%. This is a pretty easy one to call. You can pretty much say that the VS in this hex have probably about 12, and the TR, well, as you can tell, yeah, they just ticked over 48, so they probably have somewhere just around 50 players pushing LEM Station right now. In the scenario that I kind of want to use here for our group, say we just showed up at the warp gate on Esamir. We are 2 squads, so we're 24. If we showed up to this hex, we would make this into probably a 40-60 fight. Probably not enough to actually re-secure it at this point in time, just because there's a minute 46 left. But you could always fall back to LE and give them quite a bit of a fight. Hopefully allies show up. Some of the other things that, some of these heat maps and whatnot that I don't use, but I imagine that a newer player would be quite happy with being able to use these. If you click on the filters tab in the top right corner, you have the option of choosing some checkboxes here. Usually I just leave all these defaults, but what we're really looking for is the heat maps. The heat maps will change the map in a way that basically allows you to see where the enemy is without having to look for the little battle markers here, these little exploding things all over the hex. The only one that probably matters to anyone is enemy activity. As you can see, because of the 48+, this one lights up bright red. If we expand out to the entire continent, you can see we have quite a few of these pretty dark red hexes, and various lighter hexes. These 1 to 12s are just the lightest shade of red possible. And of course, if there's no enemy at all in them, just nothing. If you ever feel like complaining and you're looking to see where your allies are, you could always use ally activity, and there's where they are. But basically, you want to use all of these map options to basically identify population and distribution of that population, and that will allow you to find good fights, or at the very least find a fight. When you're also choosing a hex, you want to keep in mind how many enemies are in a adjacent hex to what you're going to be responding to, as well as the enemy warp gates. So in this case of LE Forest Pass, it probably doesn't really matter what's in the adjacent hexes, because they are overwhelmingly pop this right now. If we look at Bulwark, 80-20, 1 to 12 in each, maybe a couple TR still behind here, some stragglers coming up to this LE Forest Pass. Not too much of an addition to what's already going on. If we look up toward Invari, you can see that NC have probably 36, somewhere in the 30s here at Invari Biolab. In this case, we'll take a look around and basically identify how many other NC as well as how many allies are in the area. Especially for the adjacent bases to like major hexes like this, you want to know how many allies are actually there as well when you're taking into account how many friendlies are going to be there when you show up. So you got 12 to 24 in Invari proper, then another 12 to 24 at Invari South Bank actually. So it's probably not as bad as a 70-30 makes it actually appear to be. It's probably more like a 40-60 or a 45-55. So you could probably make a difference in this hex with 2 squads right now. And the adjacents are slightly favoring VS, so it's probably just a couple in each of those. And there's nothing to warp gate right now. The ideal situation that we want to find ourselves in is basically a 40-60 fight. A 40-60 fight will usually be a slowly losing battle with the option of trying to use force multipliers to turn the tide in our favor. 40-60 is best in a tower 3 cap. You hold the building that has A basically, and you get kills for 20 minutes. After the 20 minutes, you'll eventually lose the base, or if you're feeling particularly encouraged, you could always try external resecures on the other capture points or go after their spawns. There's always options in a 40-60 fight, as well as the option of eventually having your faction show up and defend. If you're feeling particularly non-future crewy and you want to attack a base, there's a few different scenarios that you want to consider. If a base that you're going to show up at is already being defended, you will probably need 55 or 60% of the population in the hex to make any kind of effective push on the base. A 50-50 fight at, say, a biolab, well, anything really, an amp station, wherever you might be, and the enemy's already waiting for you to show up there, is going to be a very long, drawn-out fight, where more than likely the enemy can easily respond to you. So you'll show up at the fight, you'll start pushing in, and before you know it, the enemy's going to have like an extra 2 or 3 squads, and you're just going to get pushed back. This is good if you want to lure the enemies out into something, and we've done that before for subterranean nanite analysis, but that's a different subject. If you initiated the fight, meaning that you showed up before any significant amount of defenders showed up to the fight, you can pull these off with 45 or 50% population in the hex. It's basically using choke points. If it's say like a cap point in a 3-story building or some kind of like indoor thing where there's choke points that we could hold, the enemy responding to it is going to be most likely disorganized, and they're going to feel rushed because in their best case scenario, they've got less than 7 minutes to respond. More than likely, they're going to have less than 2. If it is a larger fight, and you started this, you're going to make the enemy waste a lot of resources if they want to resecure it. They're basically going to have to max crash, do a bunch of galaxy drops, just to try to get you off the point. And really all that really does is, at the end is they either have to bring their gals, pick up their maxes and whatnot, or they just have to redeploy and waste all those inventory resources. These are not always the cases as far as what population percentages you need or what you really want to consider for stuff like this, but it's the general outset. There's always going to be exceptions. Another thing to note, in redeploying from a fight, so say we get involved in one of these fights, we just resecured a point, and actually I'm really stunned at this LA Force Pass has not flipped yet. That's really kind of weird. If you just resecured a base, say it's a a 55% VS fight and 45% enemy. Your two squads of a 25 to 48 fight. Say it was at Octagon or something like that. Unless the base that you need to respond to is absolutely critical, you do not want to redeploy out of that fight. You really need to keep in mind what part of that Vanu or friendly population that your two squads are. If you leave that fight and go to respond to something else, and that base was also fairly important, you're more than likely going to lose it. While it is fair to say that in most situations, when an enemy gets kicked out of a hex like that, trying to attack it, they will redeploy. They will not always redeploy, especially for like alert bases. One option to consider is if something like that comes up, say we have more than 2 squads, maybe we have 4. If there's something else we need to go to, we can always leave a picket defense, leave 1 squad or 2 squads behind, send the rest to wherever else we need to go, and hopefully get your allies to show up at this base to take over for you, or choose one to abandon in the end. Let's talk a little bit about alert meta as the final part of this little video as well. This is a territory alert going on right now. The biggest key of territory alerts is hardpoint bases. Basically 7-point bases, say like Octagon here, or Jaeger's Crossing. Or ideally, Sarah Listening Post, especially on Esamir, is a very good hardpoint base. You're looking for bases where the enemy is a little iffy about attacking, because they know that more than likely they're going to be responded to and attacking them. These little 4-minute bases are nothing. In most cases, you can give these up and leave these for more trying times and the last 30 minutes or so of an alert when they can be easily captured. Hardpoints will basically be the edges of your territory in most cases, and these also actually include the major bases like the buy labs and the aim stations. What you never want to do in an alert, and this is more suited for especially Esamir actually, you do not want to get in the way of TR and C fights. That is pretty much going to guarantee the other 2 factions to start concentrating more toward you, and it is the fastest way to not have any territory by the end of the alert. I also wouldn't recommend making sudden, large changes in how you distribute population, unless it is like the final parts of an alert. If you and TR just kind of been doing small skirmishes on their territory fronts for most of the alert, don't suddenly drop a couple platoons on them midway through the alert, because that's the fastest way to get them to respond to you. And by getting them to respond to you, they're going to start pushing your territory. Again, another way to really lose a lot of territory at the same time. Until, of course, this lasts, 15 minutes or so. Start going all in on just capping everything that the say TR or NC own, if that wasn't the faction you're already hitting pretty hard. Global alert wise, it's a little bit different. I'll use an example of Amherst for this one. Say this was an amp station alert. We have Sungray. In any ideal situation, we want buffer zone. We want at least 2 hexes of buffer zone in every direction, which gives us at least 8 minutes of buffer time where we can either ignore it and respond to more important bases, say an amp station is actually being hit at this particular moment, or to give us the option of an early warning so that we can show up and kick them out before they escalate population. Because in most situations, an enemy is going to send just a couple squads at most to capture the adjacent territory, unless they really have to. Once the enemy, say, grabs Sungray Westgate in this case, that 12 to 24 enemy that's pushing in is most likely going to suddenly become a 48 plus, multiple platoons, just drops in the base and just tries to wipe it out immediately. That's why if you're doing it right, the enemy will never actually get to the base in general, unless you're getting hit on a lot of fronts at the same time. Other than that, that's all I really have for this video. I was hoping to show you guys a little bit more of good fights to respond to, but there's a ton of Zergy fights going on Estimate right now. One quick last note as far as fights we probably actually redeploy to from the Warp Gate. LD4's pass is probably around either a 36 VS 48 TR or possibly 2436, which with 2 squads you could easily assist in pushing TR back out of LE4's pass, and that would be a pretty good thing you could do, the drop on the cap point here at LE4's pass. Invari would be a little more iffy. It's hard to say exactly how much they may have right now. It is definitely at least 25. It'd probably be a bit of a grind fest in this case. And finally, this is probably advanced mode. If you can't find a fight for some reason, and there's definitely fights everywhere right now, so it doesn't really apply when I'm making this video. I would say in the case of Indar, if we are VS and we have no fights for some reason here, we have the option of dropping on an enemy fight, just to get a fight. Even if there's absolutely no point in attacking that base, because we have no adjacency whatsoever, say if it was Indar Komradev, we could drop on that base if the enemy was attacking it and defend it for another faction. You know, just hold out in this little 3-story building, get some points, have some fun. As you can see, there's an Indar X fight going on actually right now, 48 plus, because these are both enemy hexes. Or both enemy populations. It's hard to say how exactly many are here. We do know it's at least 48 plus. I mean, it could be 100. Who knows? This would be an opportunity for us to drop a couple squads of Lancers on this little hillside to the east of Indar Excavation. It's a wide open field, and the attacker usually has a ton of armor in a push like this. So we could get a good amount of push going out of this. Wouldn't really accomplish anything other than certs in the end, but it would really make the enemy mad. And if you're lucky, it won't spawn off Indar Komradev. And there's a bunch of different situations like this that I could mention, but it's for a different video. Just wanted to make sure that I provided that mention of an option for squad leaders if things get really that dire for a good fight at the time. So that's it for this video.